Welcome, everyone. This is the International Peace Coalition. This is our 71st meeting that we've had weekly, which the intention of this discussion is to bring together people of all ideologies, as many nations as possible, to unite for true peace. My name is Anastasia Battle. I'll be your moderator today, as well as my co-moderators, Dennis Small and Dennis Speed. If you are joining us over the live stream, thank you for joining us. If you're part of a sister streaming, I'd like to thank the various different alternative media outlets who have been sister streaming this meeting, which we've been able to reach somewhere around 100,000 people. It's very important that we're able to do this across many different languages and countries. So we're going to continue with that process. If you'd like to stream this video in the future, please reach out to me. We're happy to do that. Last week we had K-Talk Radio live stream this from the middle of the United States, which is very important that this is happening. So I just want to send a special thank you to them for doing that last week. So if you'd like to join the discussion period, we're going to have a general opening period of this meeting of speakers that we have planned out, and then we'll go into a discussion period. If you go into the YouTube description, if you're on YouTube, you'll see the registration link. You must be registered to join the discussion, and you'll get the Zoom link to join and speak with the various speakers we have lined up today. If you're not on YouTube and you're on some other platform, go to the schillerinstitute.org and you'll find the just on the top of the website the RSVP link to register and get the link there. So again, thank you for joining us. So there's been a lot going on over the last number of weeks in stopping World War III. We've had excellent demonstrations, which you'll see Scott Ritter was one of the people who held one of these demonstrations to stop World War, which was very important. He'll be on today to speak to that and many other things. But we really have to mobilize our forces now to unify this process to stop this oncoming crisis. So I'd like to have Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who is the founder of the Schiller Institute and the initiator of the International Peace Coalition, to start us off. Please go ahead, Helga.
Well, let me greet all of you first. Unfortunately, we are still in a situation where the two regional crises both have the potential to, escalate in the worst case to a global nuclear war. And that makes our efforts all the more important. Now, the situation in Ukraine, it is clearly coming to a point of decision. Let me review it briefly. A couple of weeks ago, when Prime Minister Starmer visited Washington and talked with Biden, it was expected that they both would give the agreement for Ukraine to use the long-range missiles for strikes deep into the territory of Russia, which Starmer had basically already agreed upon. And then in the last minute, President Biden did not give this agreement. Now, after some weeks have passed, it really looks like that the possible explanation, which naturally I can only hypothesize, but it really looks like that President Putin, who had made very clear warnings about the change of the nuclear doctrine of Russia, probably could have sent a private démarche to the United States and to that meeting, warning them what would be the consequences and the Russian reaction. In any case, this resulted in the fact that up to the present day, Biden has not given that permission. And it seems to be that there is a factionalization in Washington, whereby the State Department and the National Security Council, that is Blinken and Sullivan, are still very much on the confrontation course, while it seems that the military, in particular Defense Secretary Austin and William Burns, probably are slowing things down, because the military actually in all countries of the world know what a war is, and especially what a nuclear war is. So that seems to be what is still going on. One doesn't know how long and so forth, but the situation on the ground in Ukraine is also not going to remain for long, because the Russians have made massive military advances. The Ukrainian army is clearly in an incredible lack of soldiers. The rumors that the war is lost are spreading everywhere. There are many people deserting, soldiers who do not see a reason why they should go just to the front and die. And so the situation is very demoralized. And that may be one of the reasons why you can hear all of a sudden new tones from such people like Stoltenberg, who up to recently was Secretary General of NATO. Now he is retired, but he is all of a sudden talking about the so-called Germany model for Ukraine. What they mean by that is that there would be an agreement, at least for the time being, that Ukraine would agree to losses of territory and basically join NATO, but in this ramp form. But the eastern parts, which then would stay with Russia, would not be affected by this NATO membership. Now, that is one of these proposals which will go nowhere, because it does not address the main reason why Russia started the military special operation in the first place. In other words, it does not take care of the legitimate security interest and concern of Russia, namely not to have offensive weapon systems immediately at their border. So that is, in my view, a no-go. And the war is clearly coming to an end. There is a physical limit which is being reached. And with the winter coming, I think it's a question, in my view, at best of weeks until that will be very clear. Now, that does not prevent the new Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, who is just in London meeting with Starmer, and also Zelensky is there right now. Probably they meet all together, where Rutte was saying, that he would warn NATO not to listen to the Russian saber rattling, that one should not pay attention to that. So it's not settled, but it is very clear that this thing is coming to an end. And then is the question what Harald Kujat, the former general inspector of the German Bundeswehr, already said August 1 year ago, that we are reaching the point where NATO has to make up their mind to either offer a negotiated solution to Russia, which is acceptable for Russia, which this present German model is not, or escalate. And that will be on the table. There will be maybe a peace conference, which has been mentioned here and there in the time of the interregnum between the two presidents, or even when the new president in the United States is in. But there again, it comes to the point of either really go for a settlement by diplomacy or escalate. Naturally, if one thinks about it, all this talk about Baerbock saying that we have to ruin Russia, well, not only is Russia not ruined, its economy is doing quite well under the circumstances, but instead Germany is ruined thanks to our foreign minister and especially our economic ministers, who are both from the Greens. It will obviously be not easy for the collective West to accept that the Ukraine war is lost after the shameful loss in Afghanistan a couple of years ago. Now the Ukraine war being lost, so it is a moment of utmost tension. Now the other major crisis, the Middle East, remains super dangerous. The world is still waiting for the so-called Israeli retaliation. where it is not clear what they will do. Will they only, in quote, hit the oil refineries or even the nuclear facilities, which would not be possible without the use of nuclear weapons, because the Iranian nuclear facilities are deep in the mountains, and even Western US bunker busting bombs apparently are not capable of really hitting this. If it comes to that, the world would be in a catastrophe, and Peskov and others are warning that indeed the Middle East is sitting on the verge of a catastrophe. Now, the Iranian foreign minister, Arakshi, was just in Qatar and meeting with Saudi Arabia also, which is very important, because obviously if Iran and Saudi Arabia are talking with each other, it's very decisive. And also Arakshi warned that Israel is dragging the whole region into a catastrophe. So naturally, the genocide is going on in Gaza and Lebanon. Lebanon is almost as horrible a situation as in Gaza, but we will hear more qualified people talking about that momentarily. So I can only mention one last thing concerning the so-called unity of the European Union. There was an incredible shouting match between Prime Minister Orban of Hungary and Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the EU Commission, where unbelievable things were said by her against Orban. And Orban is now accusing the EU leadership that they are plotting regime change against Hungary in order to install a government which would drag Hungary into the war against Ukraine. I mean, this happening within the so-called European Union, or quote union, is quite a sign that that institution may not be in quite such a good shape for much longer as well. So all of this means we have to get to a new paradigm. We have to fight very hard for the new security and development architecture in the tradition of the Peace of Westphalia, because I do not think that any other solution will remedy the danger of the geopolitical confrontation between NATO and Russia and China on the other side. So that I want to stop here at this point.
Thank you, Helga, for that update, that thorough update. Next, we're going to go to, I'm going to actually have my good friend Mike Billington, who is was a 10-year political prisoner of the, he was tried and put in prison as part of the rocket docket trials of the LaRouche movement. He just did a fantastic interview with former Prime Minister Mahathir bin Mohammed of Malaysia, which was absolutely beautiful. And we'll show you a portion of that today because it's relevant to what we're talking about. But I wanted to have Mike Billington on to introduce this statement from Prime Minister Mahathir. Please go ahead, Mike.
Yes, hi, thank you, Anastasia. So what we're going to see is a clip from the interview I held with Dr. Mahathir bin Mohammed. He was the former Prime Minister of Malaysia for 22 years, from 1981 to 2003. And this covered the period of the so-called Asia crisis, which he'll discuss in his presentation. The video itself is available in full in the schillerinstitute.org website. So I encourage you to watch the whole thing in addition to these clips. During that Asian crisis, it was actually not an Asian crisis. Mr. LaRouche made very clear this was actually the first part of the general global breakdown of the Western financial system. But nonetheless, during that crisis, Dr. Mahathir took truly revolutionary steps to defend his country against the IMF and the hedge funds, and especially George Soros, who he named, that by imposing currency controls, which basically made it impossible for the currency speculators like Soros and the hedge funds from manipulating the value of the currency and using that means to basically loot these countries of billions and billions of dollars. This, of course, infuriated the Western financial oligarchs in the US and the UK and so forth. But it was an inspiration to leaders around the world, especially from what we now call the global South, the so-called developing countries at that time, who were very inspired and which had a significant part in the eventual development of what we now think of as the BRICS and the global South, and the fact that the developing countries are throwing off colonialism. They're just saying we've had enough. We're not going to accept dictates from the city of London and Wall Street any longer. The EIR magazine, of which I am a co-editor, has done 3 interviews with Dr. Mahathir. We were actively following and working with him during the time of his prime ministership, and we've continued that relationship since then. The first interview was by my late wife, Gail, in 1999 while I was in prison. And by the way, I was placed in prison by precisely the people that Dr. Mahathir was attacking, which is of interest. Then I did an interview with Dr. Mahathir in 2014, and then again this last week. So like Ambassador Jack Matlock, whom many of you saw, he was on an IPC meeting here a few weeks ago, who was in his 90s, who was a prominent part of the effort to end the Cold War. He was the foreign minister under Ronald Reagan, who met with Gorbachev and oversaw the process of basically ending the Cold War. Like him, Dr. Mahathir, who is now 99 years old, you'll be quite amazed at his extremely fit, sharp as a tack, but nonetheless, he is 99 years old now. That these are men who have played a significant part in the transformations that were taking place in the 1990s. They were central players in that operation. And they're now speaking, and they're speaking on our platform because they recognize that the world has reached a point of potentially no return. And they're doing whatever they can and calling on everybody in the world to act as true citizens and speak out against the danger we're facing. So go ahead, Anastasia, and play that video.
Well, the relationship between China and Taiwan is a little bit strange, because China could actually conquer Taiwan if they want to, but they find Taiwan is useful to China because Taiwan invests a lot in China, and Chinese tourists go to Taiwan. Also, Taiwan has access to technologies which China is interested in. So China retains the claim that Taiwan is a part of China, but has done nothing to show that Taiwan is a part of China by conquest. So the situation should be left at that. But unfortunately, the Speaker of the Congress visited Taiwan, and she knows very well that that is going to provoke China. And indeed, this is what happened. China wanted to show its military capabilities, and Taiwan is told that they should upgrade their military capability by procuring more weapons from the US. So suddenly the tension has grown, And now we are faced with the possibility of confrontation and violence between Taiwan and China in the first place, and also may involve the United States. But of course, China sometimes behave strangely, like claiming the South China Sea as being a part of China. But that cannot be settled through war. It can only be settled through negotiation, because if there is a war, the damage to all the ASEAN countries and to China would be, well, terrible. So I think the US is trying to get the ASEAN countries to confront China. But ASEAN countries are very weak, and they are not capable of fighting against China. So Malaysia, for example, wants to make the Chinese market available to us, and so are the other ASEAN countries. So why should we confront China? Yes, China has a claim against Taiwan, but they have not invaded Taiwan. The world is still divided into two confronting blocks, the East and the West. And other countries feel that they are being pressured to join one or the other. But these countries do not want to be involved in the confrontation between US and China and Russia. That is why there is a need, once again, to think about non-alignment, which was what was proposed by Sukarno. Today, that is still relevant. We want to be away, to get away from this confrontation, because it's not good for us. We want to see a stable world where we can grow through trade with the whole world. But dividing the world into two parts and then applying sanctions and even taking military action and all that, these are very, very negative. These are not the way to solve the problems of the world. We need a stable world. We don't need any blocks, east or west, but we need a world where everybody is equal, and they should all solve the problem through the United Nations without the veto. That is what we need. But since we cannot change the United Nations, so they form BRICS. And again, that is another way of having non-alignment. Well, I think this confrontation between East and West should stop. We should not divide the world into two, and we should have a workable United Nations that has no veto power. And of course, when a country is considered to be a recalcitrant, like the Israelis, then the world must take action to put a stop to this killing. Already they have killed 42,000 Palestinians, and now more Palestinians living in Lebanon has been targeted. And the world basically shows that it has no power to do anything. And we live, I mean, it's a bad, well, it's something not reasonable for civilized people to accept this kind of killing and do nothing about it. The strange thing is that the Western Alliance and Russia were partners in the war against Germany. But the moment Germany was defeated, immediately the Western Alliance formed NATO as a military alliance directed against their former partner, Russia. And so the tension grew because it would seem that the Western alliance needs an enemy all the time. So it has gone on through the Cold War, and now, of course, they still wanted the former Warsaw Pact countries to join NATO. And this is a threat against Russia. And of course, Ukraine has a very long border with Russia. And Russia objected to Ukraine joining NATO. I don't see why Ukraine should join NATO. There was, the relationship with Russia was all right, and the relationship with the West was also all right. Then there is no need to join NATO. But they insisted that Ukraine should join NATO, and this, of course, was preempted by Russia, and now there is a war between Russia and Ukraine. And that war cannot be won by Ukraine because Russia would not allow itself to be defeated. So we may reach a situation where somebody has to give in, or else the war will escalate, will involve the Western alliance and against Russia. And the attitude is that war would solve this problem, but war will not solve the problem. They are going to lead to bigger wars, to a third world war. That is what I feel.
You gave a speech at an IMF conference in Hong Kong in which you described what you just described. You described the currency speculation, what it was doing to the Malaysian ringgit, and explained your imposition of currency controls. The Asian Wall Street Journal, which is no longer published, but it was published as an Asian edition at that time. And the front page of the Asian Wall Street Journal on the same day as that famous speech in Hong Kong, published an article which was called, quote, LaRouche report helps feed Malaysian attacks on Soros, end quote. The article claimed that your attack on Soros, quote, came from an unusual source, a publication run by Lyndon LaRouche Jr., whom they described as an eccentric and a conspiracy theorist. They don't mention the things that Soros said about you, when he had called you, quote, a menace to his own country and predicted that your policies would bring ruin to Malaysia. Did that happen? And how do you see that process from the current perspective?
Well, we were trying to find out who was responsible. And we found that Soros had attacked Italy, the Italian lira, for example. He was actually made persona non grata in Italy. He also attacked the British pound. So it is Soros who was responsible for changing the values of currencies. And it must be him who was responsible for the devaluation of the Malaysian currency. So at that meeting, I did mention his name, but he denied. But whether it is true or not, I don't know. But anyway, we concluded that it was the currency traders who were responsible for devaluing our currency. And action has to be taken to stop them from dealing in Malaysian currency.
And it worked.
Yeah, it did. Later on, even IMF agreed that what Malaysia did was right.
You're right.
I just want to thank the former Prime Minister, Mahathir, for his strong fight and dedication, patriotism for his country, and for providing us this wonderful interview and letting us use it today for the IPC. He is one of the few people who defeated George Soros, the man who defeated George Soros. So thank you so much for all the work you did and what you're doing now. So we shall continue. Next, we have Scott Ritter, who's a former UN weapons inspector. He's been on here many times with excellent analysis of what's going on and quite frankly, very good at scaring people to understand what is really going on in the world, especially around the danger of thermonuclear war, as he is an expert on this. So thank you so much, Scott Ritter, for joining us and all the work that you do. Oh, you're muted.
How about this?
There we go.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to continue the trend of injecting fear into the hearts of anybody listening, because you should be very afraid. I'll just start off by saying that the world is not a safer place than it was the last time I spoke. In fact, it's even more dangerous. The situation in Ukraine continues to manifest itself in a manner which puts us on the cusp of immediate nuclear war, not something to be looking at the future. One stroke of the pen authorizing long-range weapons built by NATO and the United States, targeted by NATO and the United States to be fired into Russia will generate a Russian response that will lead us to a war between Russia and NATO, which will lead us to a nuclear exchange, which would lead us to a general nuclear war, which will kill us all. If you haven't read it, I would just advise everybody to go out and get a copy of Annie Jacobson's book, Nuclear War Scenario. I bought it last Sunday, read it twice in the same day. And I'm going to read it again because I need the message just to sink into every cell in my body, that we are all going to die if there's a nuclear war. And if we don't change the policies that we have in place today, there will be a nuclear war. So your death is inevitable. I'm speaking to dead people. Now, normally that's a normal statement. We all will die. None of us are immortal. But I'm speaking to people who are going to die unnatural deaths. Every person listening here will die an unnatural death if we allow these policies to continue. But it's gotten even more dangerous because something that hasn't been heralded in the press is the fact that Iran is now a nuclear power. Now, Iran hasn't admitted this in so many words, but consecutive statements made by senior Iranian officials have certified that the fatwa that has been in existence since Ayatollah Khomeini's time is subject to reversal under certain circumstances. And one of those circumstances is when the enemy seeks to use a type of weapon against you, you can use that type of weapon against the enemy. Israel has nuclear weapons. Israel is threatening to attack Iran's nuclear weapons facilities. As Helga mentioned, these facilities, many of them are not conducive to conventional strike. So therefore, if you're threatening to strike the facilities to take them out, you're threatening to use weapons capable of accomplishing that mission, which means you're threatening to attack Iran with nuclear weapons. That is a statement of fact. It's not up for debate. It's just ask Donald Trump why he changed the American nuclear employment posture when he was president. And the reason why is he had to incorporate two new categories of nuclear weapons that were capable of destroying Iran's nuclear facilities. One is a variant of the B-61 bomb, which is a gravity bomb dropped by certain American aircraft, including the B-2 bomber. This B-61 variant was adapted to be a bunker buster, to have penetration capability, specifically designed to destroy Iran's underground nuclear facilities. We built the weapon, we deployed the weapon, and we have plans to use the weapon. So when you hear Donald Trump, the candidate, say Israel should hit Iran's nuclear sites, what he's saying is Israel should nuke Iran's nuclear sites, because the only way you can hit Iran's nuclear sites is to use a nuclear weapon. And he can't claim ignorance on the matter because he personally signed off on the adaptation of America's nuclear employment plan to incorporate weapons that are nuclear in nature, because they're the only weapons to take out So he is encouraging Israel to launch a nuclear strike against Iran. Last May, former foreign minister of Iran, currently a senior member of the Expediency Discernment Council, a senior decision-making body within the Iranian governmental structures, mandated by the Iranian constitution to provide advice to the supreme leader, said that basically Iran, even though this fatwa exists, the fatwa is reversible, and under certain circumstances, Iran could consider pursuing a nuclear weapon. This was echoed by a senior officer in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command this past summer, who said that if Israel attacks Iran with a nuclear weapon, Iran will develop a nuclear weapons capability. The Iranian parliament has debated the issue and has sent a recommendation to the supreme leader to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty and to begin building nuclear bombs. And the Iranians again have come out and said that if Israel threatens them with nuclear attack, Iran will build a nuclear weapon. Israel has threatened Iran with a nuclear attack. Declaratory policy of this nature isn't made in a vacuum, meaning that people who operate at the level of the people that I'm talking about, who are citing fatwas issued by the supreme leader, don't make these comments casually. In fact, none of them could make that comment unless it was cleared with the supreme leader. And the supreme leader isn't in the business of putting contradictory information out there. What is taking place is Iran's version of declaratory policy. Iran is putting the world on notice that it has nuclear weapons capability, and that if Israel attacks them, Iran will use this nuclear capability in retaliation against Israel. 3 or 5 Iranian nuclear weapons targeted against Israel will destroy Israel forever. And we don't know where it goes from that. We are very close to a nuclear war in the Middle East, very close. Where will it take us? I don't know. Vladimir Putin just met with the new Iranian president in Turkmenistan. Russia's been talking about and entering into security agreements with Iran. Iran is now a member of the BRICS community. I would imagine that they are talking about what happens if Israel launches a nuclear attack against Iran. What will Russia's response be? Given the cordial relationship, the shake of the hands, the smiles, it wasn't a conversation that was a difficult conversation for either of them, which implies that Russia has given Iran certain assurances. That means that if Israel attacks Iran, Russia will have Iran's back as they respond nuclearly against Israel. What will the United States do in that instance? Now we see a situation where the scenario is spinning out of control, moving away from a regional nuclear conflict to the potential of a global nuclear conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, we've never been closer to nuclear demise than we are today. Now we have it from 2 fronts. And the United States has been on record since the time of Barack Obama that if Iran develops a nuclear weapons capability, the United States will respond militarily. Iran has developed a nuclear weapons capability. What will the United States do? Donald Trump says that will never happen. It has happened, and he's one of the main reasons why it has happened, because he withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was a treaty-like vehicle that put certain restrictions on Iran's program, allowed weapons inspectors to be in Iran, monitoring this program to ensure that Iran didn't convert a civilian project into a military project. But because we withdrew, the Europeans were never assiduous in their implementation. Iran was able to back away, legally so, from its commitments under the JCPOA to the point today where there is no JCPOA, and Iran is enriching uranium without restriction. They've enriched up to 60%. This is enough that can be justified because they use that 60% to produce fuel plates that are used in a research reactor, but it's far greater. The amount is far greater than necessary to produce fuel. What that means is that Iran will be able to take the 60% enriched uranium hexafluoride, use as a feedstock in advanced centrifuge cascades that are already in place in the underground facilities to rapidly convert 60% into 96 to 98%. This can happen in a matter of days. As I said, Iran already has the ability to convert this enriched uranium hexafluoride into metal. They produce metal plates for their existing Tehran research reactor. They could produce the uranium metal in quantities sufficient to create critical mass and generate fission. This is all that's necessary for a gun-type device. Iran doesn't need a sophisticated testing mechanism. Indeed, the United States built 2 bombs that were used against Japan during World War II. One was Fat Man, the other was a Little Boy. Fat Man was the version that was tested at Alamogordo on July 16, 1945. It was a plutonium-based weapon that used a sophisticated implosion apparatus. It had to be tested because it was all theoretical. The uranium gun design didn't have to be tested because it's very simple. It's not sophisticated. If you have sufficient highly enriched uranium, you can build a gun design that will generate 15 to 20 kiloton charge. This is what I believe the Iranians will build. It's easily deployed on missiles that Iran has. Iran has shown that its missiles can strike Israel without fear of interception, and Iran will be able to launch missiles equipped with nuclear warheads against Israel. And there's nothing Israel or the United States can do to prevent that. This is a whole new paradigm right now that challenges all red lines across the board. How will the United States respond? Well, so far we've avoided saying that we will participate in an Israeli attack against Iran because we understand the escalatory nature of this. But if Iran's declaratory policy appears to be pointing to the existence of a nuclear weapons program, will the United States now say we will help Israel? All that does is guarantee Israel's elimination as a modern nation state, and it also puts tens of thousands of American troops at risk, which means that if Iran threatens American troops according to our nuclear doctrine, this would create a sufficient justification for the United States to preemptively use nuclear weapons against Iran. If we use nuclear weapons against Iran, we could inadvertently or deliberately provoke a Russian response. And now we're all dead. Do you see how this works? This is the world we live in. It's a world we may not be living in much longer. This vote coming up on 5th November matters, but it only matters if we can get the candidates to commit to policies to talk about walking away from nuclear weapons instead of doubling down on stupid, promoting existing policies that are leading us towards nuclear war. So it requires everybody to get up and vocalize. I know that Diane Sayre is holding an event in New York City on October 26th. The next day, there will be a brunch in New York City where we will have panels that will be discussing this. We'll be advertising that, but I would encourage everybody to attend the event in New York City on the 26th and then attend the brunch on the 27th. Empower yourself with knowledge and information, and then go out there and vote accordingly. Hold people accountable prior to the election and hold whoever wins accountable after the election. If we fail to do so, human nature being what it is, we will probably end up in a nuclear conflict before the year's out, and none of this conversation matters. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, Scott. Just want to underline something that you had said about all these different candidates doubling down with stupid. I think it's important that everybody on this meeting not think about this election as a football game, which unfortunately it's how most people think about this stuff. Who do you like whom, and all this kind of nonsense. Every candidate should be gone after to stop nuclear war, all of them. We shouldn't be playing games around who do we like more or whatever. This is too risky of a situation to just let people run their mouths the way they've been doing. So thank you for saying that. I know Helga Zepp-LaRouche, she wanted to give a response. Please go ahead, Helga.
Scott, you succeeded to scare me to death. We are trying to keep up with the developing intelligence, especially naturally before such a meeting. And, I was aware of the fact that that possibility existed, but I was not aware that Iran did have succeeded in developing this capability, which if what you say is the case, indeed, we are on total red alert. Is there any way how that can be, put in front of the world public, like, for example, approaching the UN Security Council to hold a special session? Because I think, we can warn the world, but I think if it is at that point, I think it would require some institution like the UN Security Council to alarm the world. What do you say?
First of all, Iran has not formally declared the existence of a nuclear weapon. Iran's nuclear material continues to be under safeguard and inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency. What I'm saying is that Iran, by making declaratory statements of this nature, their ability to turn these statements from theory to reality is near instantaneous. It's not a large technological leap to have a nuclear device minus the fissile material ready to launch. And I believe Iran has this. Every indication through their statements implies that they are ready to respond immediately. Iran would, before they could actually have a declared nuclear capability, Iran would probably have to withdraw from the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty. That's something that the Iranian parliament is urging the supreme leader to do right now. Once they make that announcement, then Iran can shut down the monitoring. The monitoring, the IAEA monitoring no longer has legal viability, and Iran can begin the immediate diversion of the highly enriched or the low enriched 60% uranium to the uranium cascades, and literally within a matter of a day or two would have enough fissile material to convert to metal and then put into a warhead. So in less than a week, Iran can go from a policy decision to a usable weapon. And if you give them 2 weeks, they'll have 3 to 5 usable weapons. That's where we're at right now. But the Security Council can't take action on a theory because the IAEA would be called in and say there is no diversion of material. And it also raised the question of, what is prompting this threat? And the answer is Israel. And the last thing the United States wants is Israel's nuclear weapons capability discussed in the Security Council. And so that's the problem. We have an Israel that has this ambiguity revolving around its nuclear weapons capability. Everybody knows they have them. Everybody knows they're there, but nobody talks about it. And the danger of this weapons capability has become manifest because previously it was talked about as only the Samson option. That is, if Israel's being overrun, Israel will use these weapons to take everybody down with Israel. But now we have a situation where Israel's literally talking about a strike against Iran's nuclear capabilities that doesn't involve Israel being overrun. It's a reaction to a problem that Israel created by assassinating a senior Hamas official in Tehran on the day the Iranian president was inaugurated, on assassinating Hassan Nasrallah, on attacking the Iranian consulate in Damascus. This is a problem of Israel's own making, and now it's manifested itself in a manner in which Israel is threatening to attack Iran in a manner that can only be accomplished with nuclear weapons that Israel has yet to declare officially having. And this is the real problem here. To solve this problem, we have to not only talk about walking away from whatever could trigger the potential use of nuclear weapons by Israel, but we have to address the destabilizing reality of Israel's nuclear weapons, because those nuclear weapons now manifested themselves in a cause-effect relationship with Iran, which is going to prompt Iran to withdraw from the NPT and produce its own nuclear weapons. And if Iran withdraws from the NPT, Saudi Arabia has indicated they will be seeking their own independent nuclear deterrent. Turkey has said the same thing. And now we have a region totally out of control, making the possibility of nuclear war even more likely. So, we need to start talking about disarmament. We need to start talking about breathing life back into the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, but the JCPOA cannot be called the Iran nuclear deal anymore. The JCPOA, in order to be viable, has to involve Iran and Israel agreeing to, reciprocal inspection regimes that lead to guarantee that neither nation has a nuclear weapons capability. Israel's nuclear weapons cannot be allowed to exist. They are an existential threat to the world, to the region, and to Israel. Because if Israel uses nuclear weapons against Iran, Israel will cease to exist. That is a 100% guaranteed outcome that will happen. Even if they don't strike nuclear sites, if they just limit their strikes to oil facilities or anything else, Iran has said they will fire over 1,000 conventional missiles into the critical infrastructure targets of Israel. This means they'll destroy all of the power plants, all of the water purification plants, all of the power distribution plants, all of energy production, oil and gas, critical infrastructure, and Israel will be thrown into the Stone Age. And if Iran does that kind of attack, then the Samson option kicks in and Israel will retaliate with nuclear weapons, which will lead to Iran developing nuclear weapons and deploying them against Israel in a very short period of time. We are in an extremely dangerous situation, and it's not made any easier knowing that Benjamin Netanyahu and Joe Biden had a virtual shouting match. When you talked about a shouting match, I thought you were going to talk about the phone call that Biden had with Netanyahu, where Biden basically told Netanyahu he has to stand down on this irresponsible posturing vis-a-vis Iran, and Netanyahu told him to pound sand. And so now you see, for instance, people are asking, why did the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations come out and suddenly articulate in favor of two United Nations resolutions regarding Palestine? One, a ceasefire, the other one, the immediate dispatch of humanitarian goods. These are two resolutions the United States has opposed in the past. And the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations has articulated forcefully against these. But now she's advocating for them. Why? Because Biden promised Netanyahu that if he walks away from attacking Iran, that the United States would provide not only unprecedented levels of military support, but also we would have Israel's back diplomatically. Israel will never fear anything from the United Nations. Netanyahu has disregarded Biden's advice, and so now Biden is making Netanyahu pay a price. And this, I don't think is going to succeed in doing anything other than pushing the Israelis even closer to making the decision to attack Iran. We are in a very dangerous situation because the United States appears to have lost the ability to pressure Israel into taking actions that are good for the United States. And if Israel's not taking any guidance, that means that this comes down to not what's good for Israel, what's good for Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's willing to sacrifice all of the people of Israel, over 100 million people in the region, because he wants to go down in history with a legacy as a strong man who saved Israel, but he's going to be the man who destroyed Israel and took the region down with him.
Thank you, Scott, for that. Thank you so much. That was incredibly useful. So I think we'll definitely be able to take what you just went through, this short portion, and then what you went through before. And I think we should use this as the IPC for wide distribution and people's organizing. So we'll make sure that we get that out for everyone. So thank you, Scott, for joining us and laying this out for everyone. This is very useful. We are going to continue in the Zoom chat. I did put the link for the October 26th event in there. Please feel free to use that. If you want to find out more about what Scott was talking about, you can go to vegasserpeacefund.org. Okay, so next, I'd like to go to another special guest, Bassam El Hakim. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name. He's a friend from Lebanon. He's the executive committee member of Independence for Lebanon. And as we know, Lebanon currently is getting the Gaza treatment. So thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Hakim.
Merci beaucoup et bonsoir à tout le monde. Je vous remercie infiniment de m'avoir donné l'occasion de...
Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to address this audience. It's the first time I participate in this forum, and I see that with a first taste of this, I noticed the interesting remarks made by Mrs. LaRouche, whom I know for some time now, and Mr. Ritter, to whom I would like to express my appreciation. We follow very closely what he says and the videos that he's made. Please, Mr. Ritter, you are very much appreciated in my country and in all of the Arab Muslim region. Now, myself, I'm happy to be invited to this session, but I must admit that I only learned about it yesterday. Better late than never. But I just concocted something quickly. I hope I won't disappoint you, but I will present this in three parts, which are coherent with what has been said, and also follow fairly closely the complexity which was also mentioned here. But I would like to also take up another situation, the complexity of the situation, the current situation. So I'm going to bring up shortly, of course, in a review, the Israeli problematic, the regional, and the Iranian. Regional because we see what is at stake. The most visible stakes, you have the conflict, you have the war with Israel, against Israel, against Gaza, and you have this showdown, which we heard about from Mr. Scott Ritter. So this conflict is arising between the regional aspect. You have Iran, and behind Iran you have a certain number of powers, such as Russia, China. And on the other hand, you have the United States at the head of NATO, which is represented in the whole region by Israel. So, how to introduce all of this? I will begin with the beginning. On October 7th, 2023, in an unforeseeable way, you see Palestinian militants, activists succeed in carrying out an unimaginable tour de force. They broke through all of the defense of Israel, put up around Gaza. They overcame all of the electronic and other devices that had been set up. They killed, or at least during this confrontation that happened, when the Israelis realized what had happened, they began shooting in all different directions. And the Palestinians managed to take 250 hostages. There was a confrontation between the two artilleries, which made, let's say, 1,200 killed. So propaganda says the intoxication from Israel says that when they describe what happened, you probably know it all very well. So you know how the media manipulation worked in that sense, what Israel said about the attack. And it was all media manipulation. They talked about the women who were raped, the children who were lynched, and so on. It wasn't true. And I won't go into the details of all the rest, the massacres, the genocide in Gaza with more than 42,000 victims, mainly civilians, and more than 2/3 of them were women and children, plus 10,000 who have disappeared under the ruins, and 80,000 which takes us up to 150,000 victims. This is a genocide, and it's still going on. And at the same time, we see the same thing happening in Israel, at the hands of Israel. Israel wants to destroy Hamas, but they don't really fight. They're just killing and destroying. So they beat up with valiant people on the terrain, on the ground. But after 1 year, they still haven't reached any of the aims they had set out for themselves. They didn't eliminate Hamas. They have not succeeded in imposing their will on Gaza. It's true that they have killed a lot and destroyed a lot. And now in Lebanon, they're by the same token, they are committing massacres against the civilians under the pretext that the civilians are being used as a shield by the Hezbollah. It's not true. And one other thing, of course, you have the assassination. There they succeeded in assassinating Nasrallah and other leaders of the Hezbollah. But besides those few coups, they're just carrying out an extermination war. It's under the guise of a military conflict. They're exterminating the civilian population. So the Western powers, the Western leaders, how are they reacting to the October 7th attack? They rushed to Tel Aviv to embrace Netanyahu under the guise that Israel has the right to defend itself. So this support they gave Netanyahu is to allow him to carry out, to permit all kinds of massacres, all kinds of atrocities against the population, with the danger of annihilating what has been there and of destroying international law and rules that have been put into place after the Second World War. And Israel is a rogue. And the risk is that, I hope I don't offend Scott Ritter, but the United States, in this game that they're playing, it cannot work. You can imagine that the United States would allow Israel to do this, and that they are impotent to change that. No, the United States is not unable to do anything. They are accomplices of it. These arms that are delivered, these bombs of 1 ton that are being used and which enter deep into the ground to assassinate Hezbollah leaders. So who can believe that for 12 months the United States has not played the role of intermediary between Hezbollah and Israel? And Israel has not accepted the suggestions or the proposals of Biden. They were only flexible in negotiations. The Hezbollah was flexible in the negotiations, but Netanyahu sabotaged it every time. And after all these massacres, 12 months later, who can believe that the Biden administration has just been unable to change things? So why did the Palestinians carry out this attack on October 7th? Well, there are many reasons for it, but I will quote one of them. You have all that the Palestinian population has endured for the past 73 years, since 1948. Tortures, arbitrary detention and arrest, people who were arrested for decades, provocations, persecution of religious people, inspections, illegal inspections of citizens. All of that is a reality that no Palestinian can accept forever. So the story of the Palestinian state, I'm not going to tell you all about this, but just for memory, the Palestinian state, to come back to a point which was a founding moment, in 93, there was at Camp David, the Prime Minister of Israel signed a historic agreement with Yasser Arafat, together with Bill Clinton, at the end of very laborious negotiations in Oslo and around that. They came out with an agreement on the creation of a Palestinian state on the ground of Palestine, which came out of the War of 1967 on the West Bank and Gaza Strip and so on. So we know what happened after that. 2 years later, after this agreement was signed, Rabin was assassinated, the man who had signed this agreement. And who was the main culprit behind this assassination? Maybe not the one who pulled the trigger, but it was Netanyahu who was the leader of the Likud at the time. The same Netanyahu, we saw how he acted after that against the Palestinians, and he was constantly opposed to a Palestinian state, and was eventually evacuated by a law taken by the Knesset last July. The Palestinian state was declared null and void. And then in 2018, the same Knesset passed a law proclaiming Israel the national state of the Jewish people. In other words, they forced out others. The Arabs, Muslims could not become Israeli citizens. And all of the plans after that led to or became moved in the direction of pushing the Palestinians Gaza toward Egypt,
renvoyés quelque part ailleurs.
And after that, they would maybe be transferred somewhere else. And the Palestinians from the West Bank were supposed to be transferred into Jordan. So that and then the north of Israel, and those Palestinians are supposed to be expelled toward Lebanon. There are already 500,000 Palestinians who are the descendants of the 130,000 Palestinians who became refugees during the first terrorist organizations in Israel, leading to the creation of Israel in 1948. So the Palestinians had to suffer the atrocities against themselves, the torture. They saw that the Palestinian state was basically put off forever. And thirdly, they saw that coming into being around
Mr. Hassim.
Excuse me, Mr. Hashem.
If you could please summarize, just because we have
Could you please
couple
summarize a little bit because we have some other
speakers. Sorry, but please, yeah, could you just take 2 minutes to summarize?
2 minutes? Ah, ok. Bon, donc, ok. Donc, je voulais dire que donc il y a ces deux points. Le troisième point, oui, le troisième, c'est le fait de voir cette
French
paix abrahamique.
translation, could you come back into the English channel, please?
Oh, sorry.
Cette paix abrahamique,
Okay, sorry.
on dit la normalisation des relations
So
entre
now I
Israël
talk about the normalization of relations with Israel.
en même temps que les autres signataires d'accords de paix.
At the same time as the others who signed the peace treaty, Egypt and Jordan, they saw that their cause was about to be dissolved completely. And a fundamental point for what happened later is the announcement of the Indian corridor going from India to the Moyen-Orient, the Middle East, and then to Europe, and this so-called corridor going through Israel for security, so-called for security reasons, to provide the Arab countries with the security they needed. So all of these elements were in the background of this action behind the October 7th attack. So did they have the right to defend themselves in Israel? As the Westerners proclaimed. So the question is, do the Palestinians have the right to defend themselves? That's the question is still raised. The Lebanese have been drawn into this war not for reasons. There are no real reasons for this. The Palestinians and the Lebanese have always been linked. That's the only reason. They have always had close relations. They have cultural, religious, popular customs which bring them together. They've also known the same conditions. And secondly, Lebanon, from the very beginning of the creation of Israel, Lebanon has been Lebanon has had disastrous consequences because there were so many Palestinians who were chased into Lebanon. Now there are over 4 million inhabitants in Lebanon and over 1 million Palestinians. And now there are many hundreds of thousands more who threaten to come because they've been pushed out by Israel. There's also the threat of chasing out others as well, which would change completely the demography of the country. They want to chase out the Shiites also, who form the majority of the Lebanese population. They want to push them into Iraq.
Excuse me, Mr. Hassim. We're going to have to continue, but thank you so much for your contribution.
Okay, we'll have to.
Je voulais dire, et je termine avec ça. Il y a d'autres raisons, mais je ne vais pas avoir le temps de les énumérer.
There are other things. I just want to say one other thing. The question is asked.
Entre le Liban et la Palestine d'un côté, Israël de l'autre.
The conflict between Israel against Lebanon and Palestinian. You have this, what is at stake is this corridor. And against that, you have a project which is older, which is the Belt and Road, or the new Silk Road, motivated by China. There are also other plans for the world, and China is involved in the relations more and more closely with Russia, with Iran, with the other countries in the area. So the carrying on this confrontation will lead to an even more dangerous situation that what Scott Ritter identified just before. So these two powder kegs in Lebanon and Palestine threaten to lead to a regional conflagration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, it's very important what you're going through, and I apologize. We have to continue, but thank you so much. And we're going to have a Q&A period where you can bring up more. There are people in the audience who I'm sure would love to talk with you. So thank you so much for joining us. I apologize. We have to continue because this is very, very good. But thank you. But going into the next speaker, this is Layla El-Abid. She is the co-founder and co-director of the Uncommitted National Movement in the United States, which she's actually a collaborator in the Dearborn area where I'm at. So thank you so much for joining us, Layla. And please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Like Anastasia said, I am one of the co-directors and co-founders of the Uncommitted National Movement. I was the campaign manager for Listen to Michigan, which was the campaign that catalyzed the movement across the nation. I live in Dearborn, Michigan, and I'm a first-generation Palestinian American and a Muslim American. And so prior to the start of the Listen to Michigan campaign, I was organizing in my community as a grassroots organizer, building on Arab American and a Muslim American electoral power. And what the strategy for Listen to Michigan offered was a way for the Democratic base, especially in Michigan as a battleground state in the race to the White House, to send a message to this current administration, President Biden, that he didn't have the core support of his Democratic constituency in order to defeat someone like Donald Trump in November. And I think we were very successful. In Michigan, we had over 101,000 uncommitted votes that did not just include the Arab American or Muslim American vote. We actually won 10% of the presidential primary vote on our Democratic ballots in 73 out of 83 counties in Michigan. And the reason why that is so significant is because it tells the story that this is not just something that is contained among Arab Americans or Muslim American voters, but across the core base of Democratic base, where Gaza is a top policy issue. And so after Michigan, that quickly spread to other states like Minnesota, Washington State, and Wisconsin, where the infrastructure that we use to earn over 100,000 uncommitted votes and do 1.5 million calls and messages to voters, we use that same infrastructure to earn votes in those states, Washington, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and in other states that also did a protest vote campaign, uncommitted, uninstructed, leave it blank, no preference. We offered our support and best practices. So in June is when all of the presidential primaries completed. And by that time, we had earned 30 delegates going into the DNC. And we I personally worked directly with the 30 uncommitted delegates to organize around our strategy going into the DNC. And for folks who watched what happened during the Democratic National Convention, it was the first time ever in our history that we had a delegation of anti-war delegates who were not committed to a candidate going to the DNC and representing our anti-war, pro-peace agenda. And, by this time, a lot had shifted. I think not just the uncommitted movement, but the ceasefire, the broader ceasefire movement, the shift in global, in national opinion around this war shifted. And the student encampments largely played into the fact that Democrats, especially leaders within the Democratic Party, were seeing that President Joe Biden was a political liability to the Democratic Party. And so you saw President Biden exit the race and see Vice President Kamala Harris enter the race. And I think something pivotal shifted among uncommitted voters who now saw a potential for a shift. And so that there was a shift in that. And then what happened at the DNC and the fact that, we still had not had that policy change. Even today, we do not have that policy change. But I think that the Harris campaign and the current administration really signaled at that point that they were willing to risk the young people vote, the Arab American vote, and the Muslim American vote in order to continue the status quo of blindly supporting this Israel's policy to defend itself pretty much by any means necessary. And really just kind of throwing out our own American law and international law as it pertains to how we provide aid to countries that are committing war crimes. And so we are now in October, over a year into the genocide of Palestinians, and we are seeing that Lebanon is getting the same treatment as civilians, Palestinian civilians in Gaza, and we are seeing the escalation in the West Bank. Me personally, living in Dearborn, in the epicenter of Arab America, it really has had a huge direct impact. We have over 140 Lebanese American families stuck in Lebanon without our country doing what is necessary to bring those Americans back home. Lebanese Americans have been killed. Like I said, I'm in Dearborn, so I'm seeing the line, of just obituary after obituary, and funeral information of people here in my community that are losing loved ones. I have family in the West Bank that I'm thinking about. And so I think there's a real risk at this point now where the political assessment that the Harris campaign seems to have made is that they are potentially willing to risk losing Michigan, which is a key battleground state in this race to the White House. So they've made that political assessment, and I think there's a lot of reasons to it. And as one of the uncommitted leaders, we've been, talking to folks on Capitol Hill. We've been hosting meetings with our broader coalition that we built that include labor unions. One of them is the largest labor union in the United States, the UAW, along with other 7 major labor unions. We're also conversing with progressive institutions and organizations like Working Families Party, and People's Action and Rising Majority, but we're also talking to, faith institutions and faith leaders, including the Black Church PAC, talking to civil rights leaders, for leaders within Movement for Black Lives. We're also talking to the founders and organizers of the Green New Deal and Sunrise Movement, to talk about what is the landscape that we have, what is the structure, because if folks know that Uncommitted is not an organization, this is a grassroots movement that we built, and we're able to build a coalition of grassroots and grass tops. And so we are thinking about what is the most fertile political landscape that we can have to continue doing this work. And there's the political assessment that we have made along with our partners and allies and coalition members is that the best way for us to continue kind of holding feet to the fire, as far as our elected officials, not just in the White House, but in Congress and in Senate, would be, a strategy that blocks Trump from the White House. Even though we know that Vice President Kamala Harris is not going to be the hero in this situation. And frankly, this is a policy that predates Donald Trump, Vice President Harris, and Joe Biden. This is a long-term policy of the United States to unconditionally support Israel in their apartheid, in their occupation, and then their siege of Palestinians. And so we have a lot of work that we need to do, a lot of organizing that we need to do. And so the clear and focused political assessment that uncommitted leaders have made is that we could continue doing this work in the way that we've been doing this work with our allies under a Democratic president, recognizing that it is a Democratic president right now that is complicit in the genocide of Palestinians, and now as we're watching things escalate. And so we have made the recommendation to uncommitted voters to cast a vote that blocks Trump, even though we are not officially endorsing Vice President Harris. And an official endorsement of Vice President Harris would be using the infrastructure that we used in Michigan to do 1.5 million voter contact calls and messages and earn over 100,000 uncommitted voters. We cannot use that same infrastructure to earn votes for Vice President Kamala Harris. But we are going to be in our communities educating voters on what does a vote cast for Donald Trump mean. For our communities, what does a vote cast for third party? Because there has been a wave, especially among Arab American and Muslim American communities, to vote for third party. And what does a vote for Vice President Harris allow us to continue to do? And I think one point that is made, and I think it was something that Scott also said, is that beyond this election, we need to prepare ourselves on how do we continue holding leaders and elected officials and public servants accountable after this election, because regardless if it's Donald Trump or Vice President Harris, the policy is one and the same in the context of Gaza. So, and I think more so in the organizing that I am doing on the ground here in Michigan is that we, besides, what is happening at the top of the ticket, we have an issue where most voters, especially within the Arab American and Muslim American community, are just not going to go out and vote. I think that is the biggest uphill battle that we are going to have. And it's something that we need to organize years to come, is that our communities basically are not going to go out and vote. We saw what happened in the presidential primary, even though there was the option to vote uncommitted. And when I'm looking at Dearborn itself as like the epicenter of Arab America that has the largest concentration of Arab Americans in the country, we only were able to turn out maybe 6,500 uncommitted voters out of 80,000 registered voters in the state. So it kind of gives you context, like even though we earned over 100,000 voters, if you're looking at the concentration in Dearborn that has a large Arab American and Muslim American population, it was only 6,500 votes. And I think this speaks to the fact that voters in our communities are very disillusioned by the political process. And then when you look at the Michigan primary in August, you saw a similar trend of our communities not actually going out to vote, even though there was a number of ceasefire candidates or peace candidates that folks could vote for.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Layla. No, I don't mean to cut you off, and but I just, thank you for being on, and I want to be able to get to some of the questions from the audience in here, especially people who are within this community. I think this would be very important to respond to. And we can definitely continue talking about this. We are going to move on to the Q&A area, so that way people can respond to this and to other parts of this discussion. I think we do need to talk about how we intend to impact this whole situation. If you are on the YouTube, and you'd like to join the discussion period, please go to the description and you'll find the link to RSVP to get the Zoom link. You do need to be registered in order to be part of the dialogue process. Same thing with the, if you're on any other forum as well, you can go to schillerinstitute.com and get the Zoom link to be part of this dialogue. But we are going to open up the chat period so people can start joining the Q&A. You can raise your hand by choosing the raise hand option on the bottom of your screen. And we are going to switch over to the discussion period, and I'll pass the torch